Hello, everybody. We're going to get started. So, my name is Dan Buczaczer. I'm the Vice President of Marketing at Constructor. Constructor is a product discovery and search platform specifically built for e-commerce. Now, exactly what that means, you're going to learn over the course of these next 20 minutes, so I promise I'll get more into that. But we work with a range of retail customers, many of whom you've heard of, large enterprise brands like Sephora, Petco, and Bonobos. And at Constructor, we have a pretty deep tradition of doing a lot of research and applying a lot of data science to the habits of shoppers, what they buy, where they navigate, and basically how they move across e-commerce sites so that we can better understand what that experience is like. And that includes something that we put out every year that's called the State of E-commerce Search and Product Discovery. And we did this research last year and learned something that surprised us quite a bit, which is that 68% of shoppers say that retail website search needs improvement. I don't know if that's surprising to anybody, but what surprised us was not that it exists at all, but that 68%, that is a pretty heavy majority of all shoppers saying that search isn't working for them. And in fact, on top of that, 42% said even when those search results are relevant, that it's not matching what they actually were looking for. It's not matching their intent. So there's a pretty strong signal there that there is this deep dissatisfaction with search, which is a pretty central experience within e-commerce. So we wanted to understand more about what kind of an impact this could be having for e-commerce retailers, as well as what would lead to them being more satisfied with their search experience. So we did another piece of research at the beginning of this year. This time, instead of talking to consumers, that last piece we interviewed 900 consumers across the United States and the UK. This time around, we utilized our own data. Like I said, we work with more than 100 retail sites. So we looked at all of the behavioral data that we had from the shoppers at those sites, and we took a representative sample of them. 609 million searches across 244 million searchers, representing about $10 billion in search revenue. And we found a range of things. I'm going to actually include a QR code to the full piece of research at the end of this, but 3 key findings I wanted to take you through during our time here today. Finding number 1 is that searchers are your most valuable shoppers, and I'm going to dimensionalize that for you here in a minute. Number 2 is that the impact to key performance indicators from search is relatively consistent across verticals. We see this heavy impact that searchers have on a website, regardless of the industry that it's in. And number 3, and I just realized they're all number 1, so they're all important. Number 3 is that attractive search results equal higher engagement and conversions. Now, what do I mean by attractive search results? Well, I once learned that effective public speaking involves employing cliffhangers so that an audience stays engaged and they stay with you over the course of the presentation. So I promise I'm going to get to attractiveness, but let's tackle those first 2 in the beginning, and then we'll come back around to it. So finding number 1, shoppers that search have an outsized impact on revenue. Here's exactly what we found. Of all of the data we looked at, searchers represented almost 24% of all shoppers, yet they accounted for almost 44% of all of the revenue on their website. So huge outsized impact. Essentially, searchers are worth about 2.5 times what browsers are worth in terms of their ability to convert. That surprised us the degree to which that was true, and it's not just around the purchase. They're also about twice as likely to add an item to their cart, and they're almost 3 times as likely to then convert from that add to cart to an actual purchase. So clear signal that when someone comes on and does a search, it's a very clear signal of intent. They are very driven to buy something. They're highly motivated. So that's obviously a huge opportunity for you as an e-commerce site, but it's also a huge responsibility because we learned in the beginning they're not happy with how search is going right now. So there's a lot to figure out here to keep these incredibly important, I would argue your most important site visitor, making sure they get what they want and what they need. And here's what it looks like kind of across the entire journey, right? So on the left side here, you can see our universe is everybody who searched on a website. And of that universe, almost 58% are clicking on something. From there, about a third of that original set of searchers are adding to cart, and 13% end up buying something on that visit. So looked at another way, of the searchers, a majority are adding at least, or are clicking on at least one thing. A majority of those people are adding to cart, and still almost half end up buying something. So at every stage of the journey, you're seeing really clear signals of intent. This is a motivated audience that wants to buy something from your website. So that's finding number one. And then marrying that with finding number two is really interesting, which is this does not vary by vertical or by industry. We work across a lot of different verticals. So this was especially interesting to see that, you know, even though you do see some differences in conversion percentage, you see a low of 11%, a high of 17%, what you're seeing regardless of the industry is that searchers are converting about 2.5 to up to 3 times as often as those who are just browsing. So hopefully I've made it abundantly clear just how important this audience seems to be to, you know, all of the audience on your website. And so that gets us back to this third finding around more attractive results earning higher click-through rates, right? And you can actually see here that that orange bar at the bottom representing more attractive results is leading to almost double the click-through of those least attractive results. So we know attractiveness makes a big difference in that shopper being happy with their search experience, right? So what is attractiveness? I'm going to tell you. But first, I'm in marketing, so you had to expect that I was going to draw this out a little bit. I just want, by way of comparison, to explain traditional keyword search and kind of how this problem has been tackled traditionally, right? We're all familiar with traditional keyword search. It's basically been the gold standard of search for over a decade now, and it still works quite well in certain situations, right? Document search is a really good example where I'm searching for a document across my laptop or maybe within my email, and it's going to look for incidents of that keyword, how many times it shows up. It's going to pull up those documents. That's usually a pretty good way to find what I'm looking for when we're dealing with documents. But in e-commerce, it's more complicated than that. It doesn't lead to the same level of success. And to illustrate that, I want to take you through an example here around a search for butter for baking, right? That's the scenario here that we type that in. And you can see some of the results here on the right. So I've got salted butter. That's actually a pretty good result. It's a type of butter, and it is used sometimes in baking. So that's reasonable. But I can also see other results like cookie butter. Does anyone here know what cookie butter is? Okay, a lot of people don't even know. It's actually like a sweet spread, almost like a peanut butter. It's like cookie in liquid form that you put on top of things. Delicious, but it's not really used in baking, and it certainly is not a substitute for what you think of as traditional butter. Maybe even further afield is something like shea butter, technically consumable and used in some forms of cooking, but most often, especially in the United States, is associated with like a skin moisturizer, right? So definitely not what I was looking for when I typed in butter for baking. So more recently, what a lot of keyword-based search platforms have been doing is sort of bolting on a vector-based search, right? And what vector-based search is doing, which is an improvement, is instead of just looking for the number of times that keyword shows up, it is actually calculating other terms and concepts that are relatively close within a network, right? So relatively associated to that core keyword. And so you might end up with things like margarine or Nutella or eggs. And your human brain can probably pretty easily understand how those terms came up. They do seem tangential to the concepts of butter and baking. But your human brain also tells you that that almost definitely is not the intent of what the person was thinking when they typed in butter for baking, right? So gets us closer in some ways, but you can start to see where some of that deep dissatisfaction is probably coming from. So some problems with traditional keyword search is, the relevance doesn't quantify the most important things. Yes, there is math being done here, but it's mainly calculating the number of times keywords are coming up or the relative distance between associated concepts. There is far more important numbers and math in e-commerce, right? These are the things that we generally use as our metrics of success. How many times did someone convert, whether it's clicking on an item, adding it to a cart, making a purchase, etc. Those are the numbers that matter most in e-commerce. Those are the same numbers we should be using to identify what are strong search results. Another problem with traditional keyword search is assessing quality over time. So things change, right? There are trends. Things come into fashion or go out of fashion. But keyword search does that calculation once and continues to base its rankings based on that. Or potentially there's seasonality. Something that might be popular in summer is not nearly as popular in winter. It also lacks context. An actual example from a customer that we work with is that people were searching for Coke. And the results that they were getting back were Diet Coke, Coke Zero, those make sense. But they were not getting back the flagship soda. And the reason why is that brand is called Coca-Cola. And so it seems so simple and so stupid, but because there were actually no matches, at first those results were not coming up. You can imagine how frustrated that is for a searcher. All of us know exactly what Coke is. It's probably the most recognized brand in the world. And fourth of all, it relies on individual judgment calls or the eye test to get better. So eventually that problem was solved because you have humans in the loop who are going through these search results, they're looking for problems and they're fixing them. So the good news is you do make improvements using keyword relevance, but the bad news is it relies on humans finding them, hopefully quickly, because who knows how many sales you're losing in the meantime. And there's always the next thing to find and fix and hoping you're kind of capturing everything. So those are some of the problems around traditional keyword-based search. How is attractiveness different? Attractiveness is based on that clickstream of behavioral data we were talking about. These very powerful signals of what customers or shoppers are actually doing on your website. Those clicks, those add to carts, those purchases. That's the math that is being used to find which search results are most associated with those actions, and those raise in the rankings to become higher. So that's the math that matters in this case, and that's what attractiveness is based on. There was a paper written by a set of researchers at eBay that actually used a sentence around attractiveness that I liked a lot, which is, instead of trying to guess what shoppers want, what attractive search results do is simply present what they think the shopper will like, right? So it's basically this unit of probability that's saying, based on everyone who came before and looked for something, I believe these will be most interesting to you, right? So let's go back to that butter for baking example. And now you can see we have some different results over here. And at the bottom of that left side, there's salted butter again. So again, still a pretty good response. It's still on that list. But something that ranks higher than it is unsalted butter. Do I have any bakers in the audience? Yeah, so why would unsalted butter rank higher than salted butter? It doesn't make it salty, and baking is an exact science, right? So the amount of salt that you're using is incredibly important to be able to control for. So people prefer unsalted butter because they can control for it. So it makes sense that when you're using attractiveness as the foundation for your search results, something like that's going to appear higher. Also, results that didn't even show up the first time around, like raw cultured butter or European style butter, right? Raw cultured butter has a bit of a tanginess to it, so it helps bring a distinctive flavor to a pastry, right? Or European style butter basically is rich in butterfat, which gives, that pastry like a rich flavor and a flakier crust, right? So see, you stuck around for attractiveness. Now you're learning a bit about butter for baking. So that's the bonus you get here. But the point is, these were not popular enough to appear in sort of a broader search result. But because we know what audiences in the past have found helpful when they've typed butter for baking, you're getting these far more relevant results, including things that don't even have butter in the search term. So maybe something like refined coconut oil, which is oftentimes a substitute for baking for someone who might be non-dairy. So what we're seeing here is that now we have results that are quantitative, and they're quantitative off of those metrics that matter, those conversion metrics, whatever are the most important ones for you in your e-commerce site is what you can basically tune the search platform to account for and to optimize for. They're dynamic. So it's doing this calculation all of the time. So you're not missing out on a trend. If someone starts to associate it with a different ingredient, that's going to rise very quickly in the search rankings without needing a human to kind of catch this, right? It's also context driven. So that customer I talked about before that came to us with that Coca-Cola problem, once you employ attractiveness as the primary thing that you are optimizing for in terms of your search results, now it notices that people are digging 1 or 2 pages deep to find Coca-Cola off of that original search of Coke. Or maybe it sees that they go back up and do a second search for Coca-Cola when the first one didn't net anything. And so it very quickly learns, okay, when people search Coke, one of the things they likely actually want is Coca-Cola. And so it learns that automatically because it is just trained on what is actually converting. So you notice on that list, actually, I skipped the second one, which is personalized. I want to go into that a little bit more deeply because we've been talking about optimizing across all of the behavior of everybody who's been on the site, search for something and then converted. But the other really powerful thing about attractiveness is it also optimizes for the individual. So it considers me in my situation and my history on the site and what's going to be the most attractive results for me personally, right? So here's one more example. In this case, I did a search for hoodie and I got back these results. These are definitely all hoodies. And maybe these are even the top 3 selling hoodies on the site because this website maybe is using keyword relevance and also maybe some popularity, right? It's just surfacing the most popular things to the top. But these are not great results for me, right? Number one, these are some pretty bold colors. And as you can tell, like the most adventurous I get is like a muted yellow, so this isn't gonna fit my style. They're also, none of these come in my size. At least right now, they're out of stock. I'm a medium. None of these are even available in medium. And a lot of you have probably had that really frustrating example of you get a search result that you love, you click on, and you're like, they don't even have it in my size. And I've shopped here many times, right? Or I'm a sucker for like reviews, ratings and reviews. Those are incredibly important to me. These are not that highly reviewed. There's no chance I would click on these, right? If those search results were based on attractiveness, and I'd shopped here a number of times before, I might get results more like this. Even if these are maybe less popular more broadly, these are now in the nice drab colors I prefer. All of these are available in a size medium, which is great. That's exactly what I need. And they're all highly rated, right? So these are results that I'm much more likely to convert on because it understands me personally and my past experience. So going back to that result I showed you before, now we better understand what this graphic is about, right? Constructor bases all of its search results on attractiveness, and we actually calculate an attractiveness score. That score is based on all of the factors I've been talking about. Previous behavior across like the overall audience, across any individual, seasonality, context, etc. All of the things we've been talking about, that leads into a score. And so what this slide is really saying is those products and situations that had a score that was in the top quartile led to a conversion about twice as often as those that had a score in the bottom quartile. So you're basically doubling your results when you can get your attractiveness to be in that top quartile. So attractiveness hopefully sounds interesting to some of you. How do you go about implementing it, right? We have 4 recommendations. The first one is to basically continuously learn from customer interactions. And what that means is you have to ingest that customer clickstream. You have to ingest all of the behavior of what everybody is doing on your website across the full clickstream. Then you also have to be able to fully leverage that. So you need a search platform that can then understand it, take advantage of it, and dynamically change the results so that they reflect that. Number 2, we were just talking about, which is understand individual customer preferences. Hopefully the hoodie example I gave you was, this is only going to be as useful as it is to be able to calculate for any individual what is most likely to allow them to capitalize on it. That's how you're going to take full advantage of this. Number 3 is incorporate real-time factors. You have to be able to do this at any given moment if you want to fully take advantage. And yesterday I was listening to a speaker from ThreadUp, actually. She gave a great example, which was the minute the Super Bowl halftime show ended, they were getting all these searches for Kendrick jeans. Well, if you weren't trained on this, you didn't know what Kendrick jeans were, and even a search engine based on attractiveness didn't know for the first few minutes until they saw that what people were converting off of were jeans that had a good, healthy flare at the bottom, right? And so you want to be able to adapt to any of these real-time factors to really capitalize on those huge momentum shifts. And then number 4, analyzing product performance data across different customer segments. So yes, individuals are important, but you also want to recognize patterns of behavior across different customer segments. So an example is we have a pet retailer, and they realized that there was a particular set of searches and behavior that happened for those who had a sick dog at home, which is a temporary condition potentially, but it suddenly means they're looking for different types of food or different types of equipment than they maybe normally are. So these are the 4 things that we recommend. And like anything involving software, there are a number of ways to do this. But with a software platform that is optimized to do all of these for you, it is quicker, it's more powerful, and it essentially continues to learn and make this as optimal as possible. And so that's what Constructor does. And so in the beginning, when I said that we're search and product discovery optimized for e-commerce, that's what I mean. We basically have built this specifically for e-commerce because e-commerce is the only space that gives off all of this rich behavioral data that actually leads to a business outcome. And what Constructor realized is that if you optimize off of that, that is the most successful way to get to a positive search outcome, both for the person doing the search, so they're not deeply dissatisfied like we saw in the beginning, but also obviously for the business selling something because they're more likely to make a sale at the end of the day. So we would love to, show you what this could mean for your website. We actually have something that we call a proof schedule, and it's a way to literally see with your own site in your own situation what that lift would be. And it's basically a process where we put a beacon on your website because, again, without collecting that clickstream, we can't do our job because we're fully trained on exactly that. It only takes about 5 minutes to set up. Then it takes a couple of weeks to collect the data. And then we can basically tell you what that expected lift is using Constructor versus however you're approaching search right now. So we're at booth 1750, which is that way. Feel free to click on this QR code if you want to get that full Beyond Relevance report, which goes through all of the findings I took you through today, along with quite a bit more. And feel free to come up to me afterwards or on LinkedIn and say hi, ask me any questions, or send me your favorite baking recipes. Thank you.